Hello, mystery readers. I'm Alexandra Amor, and this is It's a Mystery Podcast. I'm here today with Jane Thornley. Hi, Jane.
Hi.
How are
And
you?
hi, mystery readers everywhere.
That's right, yeah. I feel like you're in Halifax, I'm in Vancouver. I feel like we're kind of waving across the country at one another.
We're bookends.
We're bookends, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So let me introduce our listeners to you. Once upon a time, Jane Thornley explored many roles: librarian, teacher, designer, school administrator, software consultant. But writer has always been her default self. She began writing stories in elementary school and completed 4 novels before graduating public education. I'll have to ask you about that. But that was just the warm up. She loves to play her life out in color, adventure, travel, and creativity. Born in Nova Scotia, Canada, she continues as an art-to-wear knitwear designer and impassioned traveler while weaving her stories against a colorful international backdrop so vibrant readers constantly remark on it in her reviews. And that's such a nice thing to have that kind of positive feedback from our readers, isn't it?
It really is, and it also lets you know what the elements are that they particularly find intriguing or fascinating.
Exactly, yes. And I was saying before we got on the call, I love your colorful background there, and you mentioned that it's all your knitting.
It is. I have knit since I was about 23, and
Wow.
this is a koi pond, by the way. You can see the fish.
Oh, yeah.
I have an art to wear knitters club where we really go outside the box and knit off the grid. So this is an example of an upcoming design. So
Oh,
yeah,
just beautiful.
I literally have fiber hanging everywhere in my house. Fiber and books and technology.
Your 3 favorite things.
Yeah, and travel. Those are my 3 favorite things.
Okay, great. Yeah. So let's talk about the Crime by Design books because I was just so intrigued by this concept and wanted to talk to you about it. So your main character is a woman named Phoebe McCabe.
That's right.
And I love that you describe her family in one of your descriptions as black market entrepreneurs. I thought that was fantastic. So tell us a bit about Phoebe.
Well, Phoebe is a Nova Scotian girl and woman, actually, and she started off wanting to play a very legal life. In other words, she was going to law school and she was trying to quelch her creative side. There's obviously some similarities between that character and myself, though we're not totally alike, and go into law. But she found out that her family was actually quite involved in black market. First, her father, because he found himself entangled with some of the interesting things that are sunken around Nova Scotia.
Okay.
And then later her brother, and it went on and on until she found out, in fact, and I have one of my lines in my upcoming, or my latest book is, for Phoebe, crime is immaterial. Because in fact, she can't get away from it. It's all relative.
Oh, yeah. Right.
So yeah, she's involved in it. She's still trying to do the right thing, and though there's a very strong textile stream through it because she's a knitter and she eventually ends up working as a gallery owner in London. She's constantly running into people trying to steal artifacts, and it's just because of her family connections where she's always been put in these unusual situations. So she has quite a few rides. It's taken her to Turkey and Warp and the Weave, and the only one I have right now that I haven't sold yet, or of these paperbacks, is this one. So she ends up in Turkey, and there's quite a involved exploration of culture and textiles in Turkey while she's, being chased by black market thieves. And then she ends up in the latest book, Beautiful Survivor, in Italy.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's woven throughout textiles, artifacts, color, design, travel, adventure, and romance. Can't leave out romance.
No, of course not.
And so I like to think of her as sort of embracing the full gamut of what a woman either experiences or would like to experience. Because let's face it, I write to entertain. This is to help you go away from your armchair and take a wild ride, places you haven't been, experiences you may not have had, And my writing is very visual.
Yes, right, which is something your reviews mention quite often is the visual element of everything. And I mean that I imagine that's so you must be a very visual person if you're so interested in weaving and knitting and textiles yourself and color.
I am. I'm
Yeah.
very visual. In fact, when I am writing a scene, I'm seeing it. It's like a movie for me. And it becomes such a reality in some senses that some of my reviewers have sent me messages and said, "I think we should get that actress to play this. And I think this should be Foxy, and I think this should be Phoebe." And they really are getting into it, and so that's kind of fun.
Oh, that's the best kind of, yeah, response you can have to a book. That's fantastic. So you mentioned Foxy, so tell us a bit about him. Sir Rupert Fox is the character, and is he kind of her sidekick, as you would say?
He is kind of her sidekick. Now, it's like so many authors have said this, and we can't quite understand how it happens. But a character that we mean to be only a sideline bit player walks onto our stage and takes over, and that's what happened with Foxy. I just love this character. He's very complex. He really is a composite of people I have known, and so he just came alive on the page one day, and then everybody said, "Can you bring back Foxy?" At the end of Warp and the Weave, everybody wanted him back. So he came back in a big way in Beautiful Survivor, and he will continue to play a major role in the series because he's very popular.
Oh, great. And I saw in one of the descriptions that he starts out in the first book as her Wednesday afternoon knitting companion, I think.
It evolves after Warp and the Weave that they
Okay.
develop a friendship, a very unusual friendship, and both of them are knitters. Now, Foxy is of the Argyle sock and, the manly kind of accessories, but as we know, in the British Isles in particular, knitting is a very manly occupation, and it's thankfully popular ideas about what men and women should do has changed enormously over the decades. But for Foxy, he's an interesting character that takes his knitting very seriously, whereas Phoebe is more relaxed, sort of the creative, oh, I'll just let it go the way I want it to go. Whereas with Foxy, there's a definite right way of doing things and a wrong way of doing things, and one must follow the pattern. So this dynamic goes between them, which is actually kind of plays out in how they interrelate in the books. Because Foxy's quite a strategic planner, and he's also fabulously wealthy. Because, of course, he's been dealing in the black market, so he's got an influx of money coming under the table, which helps to prop up his estate in the country and his house in Eaton Square and all of that. And so he has got been able to indulge his British eccentricity rather well. And Phoebe, who is a fisherman's daughter, has got this little one foot, is, proud to be, if not poor, at least humble. And, and a little wary of anyone who was born into wealth. And her godfather, who she is a partner with in her London gallery, is also, he used to be in the black market too, and he used to be friends with Foxy. And he is quite a different folk altogether, because he's more to the brash Australian type, and so quite a few sparks fly there.
Oh, nice. That's great. And then in the first book, I think, well, and maybe in more than one, she's looking for her brother who is missing. Is that correct? Phoebe is?
That's right. That's correct. In the first one, she's looking for her brother, Toby. And Toby turns out he's a very talented fellow. And I don't want to give away the story, but
No.
the way it evolved or how he got into the black market is explained in the first book. And once you're in it, and once you've created a crime or you've done a crime, of course, you're there. It's not like, unless you want to turn yourself in, you got to live with it. And so this is where her family, or crime family, seem to continually draw her in, because of course everyone believes that she must also be a player in the black market when she's trying desperately to play it clean in a dirty world.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And you mentioned you like travel, and so Phoebe's traveled a little bit. Have you been to all the locations that Phoebe has been to?
I have.
You
And in
have.
fact, I'm a passionate traveler. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, the trip to Italy was partly research for A Beautiful Survivor, and the next year I'm going to England to get some more details for the fourth book, and then I'm going to Australia to get details for the fifth book. And the travel, I really want the locations, the exotic locales, to be so vivid for people that they really feel like they've been there. And they say that that's exactly how they feel. They feel like they have been to these places and experienced what the character has experienced. And I love hearing that, because that's what I want to do. I want to take everybody with me. I
Yes.
want them to see what it's like to be in an underground city in Cappadocia in Turkey, and maybe see what it's like to be trapped in an underground city in Cappadocia. All of that. So you can have a safe adventure and experience it along with me. But I have traveled, and I just can't stop traveling. Really, I love it. I like a foot in my home world, and I like to escape whenever I can.
Yes, yeah. And it must be so great to merge so many interests from your life, the textiles, the knitting, the weaving, the travel, and writing, all kind of combined into one project or yeah.
It is. It sort of gradually. I've always written. I started writing stories when I was a child, and then the knitting came later. But I always painted. I always had watercolors going, and and it's like it's only in the past decade. I feel like I'm weaving. I really feel like I'm weaving these elements together. There is a true textile symbolism through everything I do, because it is very much like weaving, as you know yourself. When you're putting plots together, when you're putting a life together, it's the same sort of thing. You want the bright notes, and then you want the more serious foundation, and you want to have a balance of everything. So that's what I've aspired to, and it sort of feels like I'm reaching my stride now.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, very fun to
Mm.
go to a place like Italy and look over, a stunningly dizzying spot, and then try to figure out. Now, I didn't end up using this particular plot line, but at the time, I looked to my husband. I said, "How can we drive a Maserati off the end of this bridge?" You know, there are people standing around, and they're looking at me, and so we thought, actually, most of them didn't speak English, but we realized there was a couple of ladies standing and looking at us. Well, can we get around that particular block? He says, no, no, no. He said, you have to be going pretty fast to smash a car. And we're having this conversation. In the end, I didn't do it that way, but I mean, this is the kind of thing that unravels when you're traveling and writing a novel as you go.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And did you have any, I mean, I'm assuming you're a mystery fan yourself. You like
I
reading
am.
mystery books, yeah.
Yeah.
And so did you have any question in your mind about, I think it's so unique that Phoebe is a textile artist and that there's this theme of knitting and weaving in the books. I mean, that's not certainly something that you see every single day. So as a writer, did you ever think to yourself, I don't know if this will fly?
No, I never did,
You never.
because simultaneously to that, I have a business, the art to wear business that I
Right.
mentioned, and I have a number of people who actually sign up to a subscription for that, and I give patterns and ideas and inspiration. And I've been doing this for almost 5 years, and during that time, I have come across literally thousands of people who love this combination. And there are more knitters in the world than there are golfers. I love telling men that,
Oh, you're
because
kidding.
yeah, everybody has this vision that knitting is one thing, whether it be the sweater your grandmother made or the socks your mother made, when in fact it's extremely wide and varied, and there's a knitter for everything. And knitting as a group, it doesn't just include women, it's men, and it's all kinds of different people. So that audience was there, though you don't have to be a knitter to enjoy these books.
No.
It's just like, it just happens to be that Phoebe is the way we can read books where perhaps the central character is a lawyer and we're not lawyers. It's that kind of thing.
Yes.
But, and also, I do a lot of research for my books, and I wanted people to understand the history that comes with, especially antique textiles. Like in Warp of the Weave, Phoebe in she's running a gallery that has ethnographic and antique carpets for the London market. And I've been to many of these shops as I traveled, and they're fascinating people. The stories that these carpets tell. I mean, being smuggled out of cities during wars and being the prime uh, possession of a family that they love and they gather around, and the time and energy and the symbolism of the actual designs. All that is a story in itself. And I like to sort of like give people a taste of the textile world because it's not something that people write about or that it's not widely understood.
No.
We take more seriously as history and artifacts, gold and silver and things like that. Whereas in fact, the technology of weaving and textiles is even older because we always had to put something on our bodies to keep warm.
Right, before we had money or furniture or
That's right.
yeah.
And we decorated our homes, and it's an expression of who we are as humanity. So when you go into a house in Turkey, it's literally almost walled in textiles because they are saying this is who we are. It's a nonverbal communication, and I wanted to express that. So I never thought people wouldn't be interested. I thought I just got to let them see what this is all about and sort of introduce them to what I think is a fascinating topic.
Oh, that is fascinating. I didn't know much of that myself. And do you think that textiles are less well known as antiquities and the history of them because they're a bit more fragile? They have, they disintegrate and they fall apart.
Definitely.
Okay,
That
yeah.
is definitely a part. I mean, there are very few that survive, though there are a few fragments that are amazingly old that have been preserved. There's been some Egyptian fragments and Coptic and things like that. Um, what Phoebe is, what Phoebe tries to do is to express the provenance of these pieces that she has. So she tries to research the story behind a carpet, which is partly what gets her going and warp in the weave that sends her off on this trip to Turkey.
Mm.
Because when you find out that in fact most of them were, or I should say most of them, but the ones that end up in the galleries are usually ones that are rare and very treasured, and they've been treasured by their owners across the centuries. So there's inevitably a story behind them,
Mm-hmm.
and those are the ones that have been preserved, and it's just amazing what they can tell us.
Yeah.
So I guess in some extent, when I'm writing about different types of communication. There's a visual communications of visual story, and then there's the verbal story and the written story, and putting them all together is what I really find fascinating.
And have you ever based any of your storylines or plot points on a famous, I don't know how else to say it, but a famous carpet or a famous artifact?
Yes, actually, not necessarily one specific famous artifact, but certainly the story. There's a hint of truth behind every one of the books. For instance, in Rogue Wave starts from the Oak Island mystery, which you may have heard of. In fact, there's been a series running on the History Channel for the last 3 years about two brothers who have invested in Nova Scotia, this little island called Oak Island, to uncover the Oak Island treasure, which there's been many theories, many books written about what it is and where it is, but there's obviously something there. They've found some incredibly old artifacts and quite a hodgepodge of things, Templar coins and doubloons and all this kind of thing.
Hmm.
So that's based on a real event or a real situation. And then I obviously have taken it further and purely imagination what I do with it there.
Yes.
And then a warp in the weave started based on a real textile, a real carpet, and the symbolism of that carpet is based on women this would have been in Anatolia in maybe 2000 BC, the worship of the goddess, because at one time the goddess, as there was a book that says, one time God was a man, or was a woman, sorry. The main deity of life was the female who gave life.
Mm.
And so it talks about that symbolism in that book. And then Beautiful Survivor talks about the Etruscans. And the Etruscans, of course, it's not talking about one specific artifact, but the history of the Etruscans and what they left behind, primarily gold and funerary objects, but incredibly beautiful. and interesting people who were noted for not only their creativity but their love of food and dancing. And they were warriors, you sort of had to be when the Romans were coming up behind you, but they were a much gentler and almost whimsical people compared to the Romans. You can see a real difference between them in how they look at, and women, which is another thing that was interesting. Women were seen as equal with men, so they sat at the banquet tables next to men, and they had their own property, and they were beings of their own right, which throughout history has not been the case for us women. We haven't fared well.
No.
So, and that's the sort of ongoing theme. I've been very interested in how we have women look on the world, because we've had a lot of different, I guess, influences that have been, placed on us. So there's an ongoing thread that comes out through these novels.
Right, sort of tying it into reality, I want to say, or
Yeah, it is very reality. In
some
fact,
true history. Yeah.
yeah. Even though the Crime by Design series is quite funny in parts. I mean, there's a lot of humor in it. There are times when it gets quite serious too. So again, that balance.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I think at the end of the story, I mean, it's funny. It's meant to be funny. You're meant to enjoy it and not cry at the end of it. Though some people said they did cry a little bit in some of them, but anyway.
Well, and I'm thrilled to hear you have more ideas for future books. So the first 3 books are available now, and they're also in a box set, I noticed, on Amazon.
They are.
So that's great. So readers can get all 3 books for one price.
And it's lower than it would be if you bought all three. That's right.
And you have book 4 and book 5 planned. Any other ideas percolating?
I do. The one in Australia is going to be quite interesting because it really has a strong romantic note, because there's an ongoing love interest which Phoebe is trying to wrestle with. At first she's decided she really doesn't want a man. What do we need men for? I mean, they're so troublesome. And especially since she's been surrounded by nothing but troublesome men, and they're all related to her. But she falls rather heavily for this one fellow who just happens to work with her brother and be in the black market too. She can't get away from it. And so book 5 is going to deal with that relationship. Book 4 is going to be set in England, and it's going to unfold over Christmas time. And I hope to get it out before Christmas, because I think it will be an enjoyable read for the festive season. And I also have another book, which was the first one published, which is Frozen Angel. Frozen Angel is a paranormal suspense, a paranormal romantic suspense.
Okay.
Which deals with time travel, and it was very well received too. So at some point, I plan to return to writing. In fact, I'm currently writing a story that's just suspense. A psychological suspense, and at some point I want to return to sort of the elements of the supernatural, not in like werewolves and things like that, but actually plumbing some strange events that people have experienced that don't have any explanation for.
Nice. Oh, well, we'll look forward to those for sure. And so you plan to have book 4 out, you said, by the end of 2016, like by Christmas time. Yeah.
That's right.
Well, we'll keep our eyes open for that. So why don't you let our listeners know where they can find you? You've got a website, janethornley.com.
I have a website, janethornley.com, and if you type in janethornley.com, it will bring you to my writing website, and you'll see my books with the synopsises and links but you'll also see up on the top menu my knitting menu, so you can click on those and see some of the knitting I do and some of the designs that I've made. And I'm also on Ravelry. For those knitters who are familiar, they'll know what Ravelry is. And my Amazon author page is fairly complete with all my books, and there's a trailer there and things like that. So actually, I started off really in business as a knitter. I was still writing madly away in the background, but I wasn't publishing any at the time. So there's quite a lot of information out there about my knitting, and my finally I noticed when I Googled myself. Once in a while we Google ourselves, right, to see
Of
what's
course.
coming up.
Yeah.
And I found out that the writing is now coming up first, which is great because I see myself as a writer who knits, not a knitter who writes.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much for being with me here today, Jane. It's been great. And nice to talk to another Canadian. I love that.
Yes. Thank you for having me.
You're well, you're
And
so
this
welcome.
has been great fun, and I hope that your mystery readers will check up Crime by Design.
I hope so too. And
Yeah.
I'll talk to you soon. Take care.
Okay, thank you. Bye.